Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and this is my build and review for the Dragonscale blade. Now, the Dragonscale blade at launch was pretty terrible. Honestly, it was not that great. It really was lacking. It was in the katana class too, and still is, obviously, and that's one of the most competitive classes in the game. And the fact that it doesn't have any innate bleed or frost on it, with only an initial 20-second buff duration, kind of made it one of the worst weapons in the game. It really wasn't viable at all. And then patch 1.07 came out. Now, patch 1.07 changed a lot of things. They added additional flat damage after you use the Ash of War. They upped the AR in general, and they also added the buff duration that the sword stays with its frost and lightning damage 45 seconds now instead of 20. That's a big difference. That's more than twice the initial time, and that's really helpful for us. That changed this weapon completely and made it a whole lot better. Now, I came up with a really cool build for this, but before we go into that, I want to show you one thing real quick. This was actually the first boss that I fought with this weapon, and kind of when I decided that I actually liked it. It's really quite good. This boss is very easy. We're on journey 4 or 5 at this point, but they always go down fairly quick, not too tough there. So this is where you get the Ritual Sword Talisman. The Ritual Sword Talisman gives you 10% additional damage at full HP. It's one of the best talismans in the game. It's in the Atlas Plateau. I'm going to show the map at the end here, but you should always have this talisman for almost every build. It really works. Unless you're low health proccing or something like that, the Ritual Swords Talisman, if you're at full HP, 10% additional generic damage, fantastic talisman to use for all builds. Now, after we buff the newly refined Ash of War, we have 80 frost and an additional 160 flat lightning damage. So there is some things to talk about here. I know a lot of people on my channel like when I buff a lot of stuff up and make the most damage out of everything. So I try to come up with the best builds I possibly can for the weapon. Now, for this, I ended up leaning more towards the successive or consecutive attack stuff for this reason and this reason only. For some reason, flat damage is calculated differently. It's calculated in a way, and you can actually check the wikis on this, so much so that the Lightning Scorpion Charm, which is very good for lightning builds, only gives it an additional 6 flat damage, which is not a lot. So I opted for a couple other talismans in its place. I'm using the Lightning Tear for the additional 10 flat damage that you get on it, but that 6 isn't really worth it to me to take additional damage that you take with the Lightning Scorpion Charm. I did try several different layouts for this weapon, and that was something that I just wasn't a fan of. That 6 flat damage to take 12% more incoming damage, it just didn't seem like it was worth the payoff to me for that. If you're going to increase lightning damage, you can do that on a lot of different lightning builds, but for this it wasn't viable. Let's go over equipment real quick before I get into my full review and give you guys an idea on how all this goes. So we have the Dragonscale Blade plus 10, Blisson's Prosthesis, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, and the Lightning and Consecutive Attack Tear. If you notice in my left hand and at the end of the video I'll be using this, is a Fire Katana. That's to put out the frost so that we can re-proc it again. For my stats, this is my level 170 character. I think we're on journey 4 or 5 at this point, but this is very easy to get back to 150. You're just going to bring your dex right down to 60 and soft cap it instead of hard cap it. You'll be at 150 in the meta, so if you want to stay in that 150 range, there's your answer as far as that goes. Not too hard there. You'll do fine with 60 dex, especially in the early journeys. This weapon is actually quite good now, so that's 60 dexterity, and the fact that it's a pure dex weapon, getting basically all of its damage from dex, which would make that the most viable stat to invest in. And again, it doesn't get up much from strength, so there's really no issues there. 60 dexterity is plenty for this build. And now we're going to talk about dragons real quick. So this weapon ironically has additional 20% damage to dragons and an additional 10% damage to ancient dragons, but almost every dragon in the game is resistant to katanas and slash damage, and since the majority of what it does is slash damage, I can't recommend it necessarily for dragons. It's not a dragon destroyer by any means, but it's not bad against them either. They kind of equal out and make it a good weapon. It's better than most katanas that aren't bleed oriented against dragons. It does a lot of damage. It's really good, but don't worry about that additional damage because they are really resistant to slash, so that extra bonus isn't really a big deal. That's not a hard selling point for this weapon. Before we get into a couple final battles here, I just wanted to say real quick, if you're not subbed, definitely sub to this channel. We're always doing overpowered fun builds, the latest stuff. I'm going to be doing a mage coming up soon that's going to be an 1.07 update with all different spells and a ton of buffs and stuff that we can do in regards to the mage. So that should be really fun. We're going to do a lot of damage with that one. I can't wait. As you can tell here, this weapon handles fine. It's a really good weapon. We're on journey 4 or 5 here, and we're doing pretty epically well with this thing. This is a really fun weapon, and I went with the consecutive attack damage stacking more or less because it's really good to increase this weapon's overall AR and everything in general instead of just that 6 flat damage you get with the Lightning Scorpion Charm, which is not a lot for 12% additional damage. And we're buffing with Golden Vow and either Flame Grant Me Strength or Howl of Shabribri, depending on how dangerous you want to be, because you take additional damage with Howl of Shabribri. A final grade here that I think would be good would be a B-, and it was originally a D. I'm going to give it a B- now. This is a really good weapon, but it is in the competitive katana class, which makes things a little bit more difficult. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. If you're not subbed, definitely sub. There's a ton of great builds on my channel. I'll catch you guys there.